Welcome to the Songstream Project. I'm Michael Fryer, and you're listening to Amman, Baghdad, and Cairo, a musical ambassador's ABC. A few years ago, a conversation with musicians Kristina Sophia and Cameron completely revolutionized my understanding of peace music. Singing a song about peace in your own language is one thing, but it's nothing compared to simply taking the time to learn a song from someone else's culture and to sing it in their language. Shortly after the Allied invasion of Iraq in March 2003, Cameron and Kristina turned up on the streets of Baghdad armed only with their instruments and a belief that music builds friendships and understanding across cultures in ways that few other things can.
Hi, my name is Kristina Sophia, and I live in Boulder, Colorado. And in 2002, when the Bush administration was threatening to go into Iraq and bomb, my husband and I looked at each other and we just kind of wondered, what can we do? Cameron Powers, my husband, has been playing Arabic music for 30 years. He's very accomplished. He's written books on Arabic musical scales, and he's studied a lot with Iraqi musicians. In 2002, we'd only been together a couple years, but by that time I'd already learned a lot of Arabic music. I'm a singer. So we were just kind of wondering, what can we do? Because we felt that this decision by the Bush administration was really a terrible idea, and that in no way should we be going into Iraq. So we just kind of looked at each other, what can we do? And he came up with the idea, let's just buy tickets and go and see what we can do. So at that time, we couldn't get into Iraq directly. There's no direct flights, obviously. So we went into Jordan, and we landed in Amman, Jordan. We landed in Amman, Jordan at 2 a.m., during Ramadan. And during Ramadan, everybody fasts during the day and they stay up all night and eat and party. So when we got into the taxi, we were just talking to the taxi cab driver, and then we started singing him some songs in Arabic. Udaret ilayam, and different things like that. And he was just amazed that there were some Americans that would know Arabic music, and we sang all the way from the airport to the hotel. He rushes into the hotel lobby. It's just a small family-owned hotel, and says, here's some Americans that sing our songs. So they all invited us in. Before we got our room or anything, we were having a party in the lobby. Everybody was singing. It's like 4 a.m. in the morning. And this was my first experience of the Arab culture. And it was so beautiful and so welcoming. I loved every minute of it. So on that trip, we tried to get into Iraq, but at the time, Saddam Hussein was not letting any Americans in unless they were a part of a big organization or a larger group that they could send sort of minders with. So we didn't get into Iraq on that trip, but we did make a lot of friends. We flew again to, this time landing in Egypt, in the spring of 2003. And we landed in Egypt while shock and awe was happening. And the Egyptian people were very, very saddened by this. Everybody that we talked to about it would start crying and tears would run down their cheeks. We went to Tahrir Square, which is the square where most of the demonstrations happened. And we just sat down. Cameron plays oud, so he got that instrument out and we started playing and singing. I think I had a tambourine or something, which is called rik in Arabic. And we started singing songs that these people just love. And a crowd gathers around us, and which happened when we were in Amman. We would go to the parks and start playing, and crowds would gather around. So in Tahrir Square, pretty soon there's 50 people, something like that, singing these songs with us and welcoming us to Egypt. And we're getting invited to people's homes, meet their mothers. A reporter comes by, interviews us. It's a very interesting way to enter into this world through the power of music, because it's like a key. It's like a golden key. Within 2 minutes of singing a song, their hearts just open to you completely. And I've seen this time after time after time wherever we go. Syria, Jordan, Iraq, Lebanon, and into the West Bank of Palestine. We've done this, all those places. So we held our demonstration in Tahrir Square against the U.S. bombing by honoring the songs of Egypt and Iraq and Syria, and telling people that there were many Americans behind us who were opposed to the war. So from Egypt, we went overland to Jordan. And by the time we arrived in Jordan, the main part of the bombing had stopped, at least temporarily. And all the CNN journalists and journalists from other networks who were staying in Amman started going into Iraq. So there was this wave of journalists moving into Baghdad from Jordan. And our friends in Amman were saying, you sing Iraqi songs, you should go to Iraq. And we were like, it feels really right, but we don't really have the credentials. They're only supposed to let in journalists and people affiliated with certain NGOs. But we went down to a center in Amman that was giving permission to go into Iraq, and we sang them a couple songs. We just got out the instruments and played. And they're like, looked at us and they said, oh, yes, you guys should go. You definitely should go. So they called the border people who control who goes in and out of Iraq. At that time, the people in Jordan, the Jordanian government was asked to guard the border. So we were dealing with all Jordanian officials. And so we got permission, and somebody had found us a ride for a very, very affordable price, which at that time they were charging $1,500 or something for a one-way trip, because it was considered pretty dangerous. But somebody found us a ride for $400 or so. So we went, and we got to the Iraqi border, and the contact person that we were supposed to contact was sleeping or something. It was like 4 a.m. in the morning. So he wasn't available to sign the whatever it is that he needed to sign to let us through. So we just sang again for the guards that were there, and the whoever, the kind of commander guy who was in charge. And then he was so impressed by our singing, he invited all the other people to come, and we sang another song for all the people, the border guards and whatnot. And then they gave us permission to go through. So we without the right credentials, music is literally a passport. I mean, you can just get in because it's so powerful. So then we proceeded into Iraq and driving on what was once a very well-made, freeway of sorts, 4-lane highway, driving around bomb craters and burned vehicles. We stopped at one bus that had been bombed, and you could see. I mean, it was a very sad situation, and it had been full of people, and it was basically just burnt and covered in blood, which was quite shocking. And if you've never been into a war zone, it's really, really hard when you first go in. What I noticed, because there's all these things that you've never seen before, and these horrible remnants of bombing and war. But it's interesting what the psyche does. One thing that I noticed that happened to me is you get used to it. It's like the first thing is very shocking, and then you get used to seeing bombed cars and buildings burning and all these kinds of things. And when we got to Baghdad, the air was very polluted from all the buildings that were burning. A lot of these buildings at this time were being burnt by looters, people who had problems with the Saddam government. They went into the government offices and burnt these buildings and looted them. So the streets were kind of lined with people who were selling goods that they had looted. So we just checked into our hotel. There's no electricity. It's full of journalists, and for some reason, journalists all like to smoke, so the lobbies are all full of smoking journalists. Then we went out on the streets and played music. And it was just as it was in Egypt and Jordan before. People gathered around. We sang songs that were specifically known to have come from Iraq. And crowds gathered around. It was mostly men on the streets. The women were mostly inside, and the children were mostly inside because that's where it was considered safe for them to be at the time. So it was mostly men that gathered around us, but they sang along just like everywhere else. We got invited to a music school to meet someone's music teacher. We got invited to come to dinner, and meet someone's mother and meet someone's uncle who plays oud, and, invitations one after one. It's a little overwhelming because people just kind of crowd all around you. But it was so beautiful, and it just shows the power of music. When you're singing their songs that they know, that they love, they just open their hearts and their homes to you. Now, we didn't take up anyone on their invitations because we knew that by being Americans and maybe being invited to their home or their school, we were actually putting them in danger because there were other factions who were looking, were very much against the American invasion. And so we didn't want to put anyone in danger. So we didn't do that. So that was our experience in Baghdad. We were just there briefly. We met with Kathy Kelly, who was part of an organization, a peace organization, who had been there during the bombing. And we ended up writing with Kathy out of Baghdad. So basically, when we got back to America, we started doing presentations about the Arab world, kind of trying to open Americans' eyes. We traveled all around, probably doing more than 200 presentations in the next 2 years, something like that. So where we would sing songs about the Arab world, show pictures, tell stories of our encounters of people, and just kind of bring the beauty of the Arabic-speaking world to America and Americans. And this was the work that we did, for several years after, really. And it's proven to be quite a path. Actually, shortly after we came back from that 2003 spring trip, we happened to be doing a presentation in Denver, Colorado, and the person there had connections with Egypt, and we ended up being invited to sing at the Cairo Stadium for an audience of 60,000 Egyptians in the Cairo Stadium in the fall of 2003. So we went back again. We were part of that concert, which was an all-day benefit concert for a children's cancer hospital that was being built in Egypt. So from singing on the streets to singing in front of 60,000 Egyptians, just because you know some Iraqi songs, is a pretty good deal. And I just like to invite people to explore the power of music, explore the power of learning other cultures' songs when you travel. Because it doesn't matter where we are. If we go to Mexico or Ecuador, if we sing songs that are indigenous or songs that the indigenous people know, it just opens all kinds of doors.
On the back of their CD, Baghdad and Beyond, Kristina and Cameron share the following vision. Imagine, in a drastic, cost-cutting and psychology-changing stroke of diplomatic genius, 100,000 Americans are trained to sing a few popular Arabic songs. A few are trained to play the oud, the Middle Eastern lute, the nai, the flute, and the dumbek, drum. Deployed throughout the Arab world, these young Americans invade the streets of Beirut, Baghdad, Cairo, Amman, Damascus, Riyadh. The State Department pays for their meals and lodging. Simultaneously, legions of Americans learn a few Persian songs and a few Turkish songs. Additional invasions begin. This is much cheaper than arming soldiers with high-tech weaponry. As the Americans begin to master music and languages from dozens of foreign cultures, imagine the richness of learning, of friendships and connections. Imagine the eagerness with which many would return to revisit their new friends to establish new trade routes, new businesses. When you learn a new language, you gain a new soul. You can learn more about the inspiring work Kristina and Cameron do through their organisation Musical Missions of Peace by visiting musicalmissionsofpeace.org. All the music you've heard in this show comes from their CD Baghdad and Beyond, which you can buy on their website. To find out more about what we're doing at the Songstream Project, listen to or download other shows, and get involved, please check out thesongstreamproject.org. Thank you, or as you say in Arabic, shukran.